What's up, regulators? Today I'm going to show you how to do the valve cover gaskets on your 2005 Porsche Cayenne Turbo or Cayenne S. It's not that bad of a job, though you do need a couple tools that might help you do the job a lot easier. I'll explain that later on in the video.
Okay, so to get started, you can kind of see where my valve covers are leaking. This is why I'm doing this job. The biggest deal was when I took out my spark plugs, I had oil on the coil packs. So to get started, what we're going to do is remove all the plastic trim around your engine. All you got to do is rotate these little screws about 90 degrees, and then they pop up, and then you can pull the piece off. Alright, now as you can see, what I'm taking off is my air filter box for my driver's side. I'm in a US car, so it's left-hand drive. Now you can see I'm using my T40 Torx bit to remove my air pump. There's 3 screws, an air hose, and a electrical clip that you need to undo. Alright, now with my T30 Torx, I'm going to loosen up and remove all these 4 bolts that hold on my coil pack cover. This is also pretty much the same procedure as when you do your spark plugs and coil packs, except you're going to take the brackets off, which you'll see later, and taking the valve covers off, obviously. Alright, and now what you're going to do is unclip all your coil packs. So once your coil packs are unclipped, you can use your E12 torx socket and remove the bolts that hold the coil packs in.
Wow.
You like that? That's good. Make sure when you pull off your coil packs, you do a twist and pull motion. Alright, and as you can see, I removed the beauty cover on front of my engine. And now I switch to the passenger side. I'm removing the passenger side air pump to get it out of the way. And now I'm removing the passenger side air box. This one is just like the driver's side, except there is a vacuum hose on the back of it. You just pop it off by pushing the little tab on the back. And now as you can see, I'm using my 12mm triple square, my 16mm socket, and I'm removing my engine torque arm. Now what you're going to do is you're going to unplug the electrical connector and the vacuum hose connected to your brake booster vacuum assist pump, and there's 2 10mm sockets, and you can remove the whole assembly. I said sockets, but I really meant bolts. We just won't tell anybody about that. And now you can remove your 16mm bolt holding in your torque arm. Now as you can see, I have a long extension and a E12 torque socket, and I'm removing the 3 bolts that hold on the little bracket for the vacuum. I can't remember what it's called. It's like a air pump. There's a couple hoses connected to this thing. There's a little clamp that holds 3 hoses. You got to undo that clamp, but it could be a little tricky getting out. As you can see, I struggled a little bit. Wasn't that bad. It just gets hemmed up on all those hoses. And now you can use your T30 Torx bit and remove the 4 bolts that hold on your coil pack cover. My coil pack cover is broken, but it's the same process. Then now you can pick it up and pull it straight back. There is my broken piece. Alright, and now I have a T30 Torx, but some cars have a 5mm Allen. You're going to remove this ground right here next to your coil pack. And then you can unplug all your coils. Now as you can see, I'm using my E12 Torx socket, and I'm removing the engine torque arm bracket. now as you can see on the driver's side, I'm removing the 3 E12 bolts that are holding on the air pump bracket. And then once you remove those bolts out of there, you can lift the air pump bracket out of place. That side was a little bit easier than the passenger side. Now as you can see, I'm disconnecting these vacuum hoses. I think it's for the PCV from the valve cover, and then I'm disconnecting the vacuum hose that goes to the air oil separator. I just popped the cap off the timing position sensor. I can't remember exactly if that's what it's called. And now I'm removing my valve cover bolts. This side of the engine, I unplugged my injectors and everything, and I didn't really have to. There's a wire that goes across for the air conditioning compressor, and you can't get the valve cover off with that wire in the way. But I ended up cutting it because the last owner or mechanic cut the wire first. Now, before you take off your valve cover, it's a good idea to get an air compressor like mine and spray everything with the air. That way you can get all the dust and dirt out of there. If you don't have an air compressor, you can use the vacuum. It does the same thing, just backwards. And now here's a wire I'm talking about that I cut, which you could fish it out if you really want to. It's kind of a pain. It was already cut before I did this. You know, it's soldered back pretty bad. So I just decided to cut it again. And it's out. Alright, and now as you can see on the passenger side, I'm removing all these bolts too. All the bolts are pretty easy to get to. You don't really have anything to worry about. You can see basically all of them. On the top, there's little brackets on it that hold on the wiring harness. Now the big pain is the one in the back corner by the firewall. That thing, man, it will fight you the whole way out, but I'll show you in a little bit what I'm talking about. And would you look at that? Who would have known the Cayenne's a dual overhead cam?
Alright guys, so a little bit of update now that I'm at the halfway point. Basically what I found out that should help you guys. Right back here, in this very back corner, there's a bolt. And as you can see, it's right on the firewall. And you can't really get any tools in it. You could get pretty much every other bolt off the valve covers with just your regular T40 socket. This is a 3/8 drive. But not that one. I ended up ordering a tool. I'll put the link in the description. But for now, since the tool is not in the mail, I just use a 1/4 wrench on a T40 socket or bit, just like this, to get it off. Don't forget, you have to put that thing back on, so you're gonna want that tool before you start. Trust me. What's up, dog? This side, there's a wire right here that goes across the valve cover. It's for the AC compressor. As you can see, the previous owner or mechanic who worked on this car cut this wire, and they didn't really throw it back together that well. You could fish that thing out from all the way down there and get some slack to get this valve cover off. In my case, it was already cut. I just cut it again, and what I'll be using to put it back together is this heat shrink right here. It has glue. This blue stuff right here is glue, and then this part in the middle is solder, so it just solders it back together. Not the ideal way to do it, definitely not the way I wanted to do it, but since it was already cut, I said, you know, why not just cut it again? But yeah, that right there is basically what I found. Everything else is pretty dang simple. You could take these charge pipes off if you want. You don't really have to though. I left mine on. I didn't have to undo this harness as much as I did. I thought that I needed to unclip it more to get past this wire, but yep, hopefully that helps. Now let's put it back together. You're not gonna see this in the time lapse either, but I'm going to take a microfiber towel and some brake parts cleaner and see all this dust right here, the old buildup. I'm just gonna clean all that stuff off, and I'm gonna clean all these mating surfaces. Make sure that everything is nice and shiny, there's no dirt in between it. There's no dirt that would have fallen on top of these right here. You know, just as clean as you could possibly have it. And then I'll get back on video, see where the timing cover meets with the cylinder head. Put sealant in there. I'm going to use blue RTV, but you could use like the 1 minute gasket maker as long as it's somewhat high temperature. But if you don't put sealant right there, it will leak again.
Alright, and as you can see, here's my blue RTV right on that seam right there. You don't need much, just you know, about the thickness of a penny. And here comes the valve cover with the new gaskets. Installing the gaskets is not really that hard. You just, you know, put it in the same groove the old one came out of. Right now, as you can see, I'm putting in the coil packs to help align the valve cover. Also, please do not tighten down the bolts one at a time. Put every single bolt in and thread it in by hand, or else you will never get all the bolts in. So I do not have the factory service manual for this vehicle, and I do not know the torque specs of the valve cover, but you know, once you work on cars long enough, you can kind of get a feel for it. Start from the center and just work your way out in kind of like a spiral with the bolts and torque them all evenly. I would say the torque spec is probably around 12 foot-pounds to the valve covers. You got to think you're putting steel bolts into aluminum heads. You do not want to strip it or make it too tight. Now, as you can see, I'm putting back the air pump bracket and I'm tightening with my E12 Torx. This reassembly process on video is going to go by pretty quick because it's just the reverse. Here's that heat shrink I'm talking about that has solder, and I really like the stuff. And if you ever have to cut wires or do any wiring work, I highly suggest you buy these things. They are freaking amazing. That is ASMR, if I ask myself. I think that's what I mean. I probably should ask my wife. Anyways, as you can see, now I'm installing my coil pack covers, the little beauty cover. It's got 4 bolts with the T30 Torx. And now I'm plugging in my air pump, reinstalling it. Do not forget the vacuum hose that's on there. Alright, now here's basically a time lapse of me putting the valve cover gasket into the valve cover. As you can see, it's not that bad. You just put it in. That only really goes in one way. There's little grooves that you can see when you put it in there. The valve cover gasket can be inside out, which could kind of fool you a little bit if you've never done it before. But at the same time, it's really not that bad. You don't need any sealants or glues or nothing to hold it in. It's all friction fit. As you can see now, I'm installing this valve cover. You can see I'm putting the seal around the cam timing ring or sensor. I cannot remember what that thing's called for the life of me. And then I'm going to grab my coil packs and I'm going to stick them in there to help align the valve cover. Also, don't be too alarmed if when you put the valve cover on, there's still a little bit of a gap between the surfaces. Once you start tightening the bolts down, you're going to slowly start going in a spiral motion around the valve covers. You'll see it starting to settle down and get almost flush with the block, or with the head, my bad. Also, here's that tool I was telling you about buying. As you can see, this thing really hemmed up my process. I had to stop and order on Amazon and just let my car sit for 2 days while I waited for it to come in.
That's why you need that tool, guys. Look, it's still touching the firewall. But, as you can see, it's nice and tight. Look. It really wants to come out. I'll put the link in the description for this, but I almost couldn't do the job without it.
And now, as you can see, I'm reinstalling my torque arm bracket. Also, I just installed my little ground with my T30 Torx, and now I'm plugging in the coil packs. And here's my nice, lovely broken coil pack cover. Now you can see I'm reinstalling my torque arm. This one's not too bad. Also, I forgot to mention the torque arm bracket. You should be using blue Loctite when you put it on. Alright, now you get the fun joy of wrestling this air pump bracket back in. The hardest part I found with this is getting those 3 hoses clipped in there. Once you can fight past those hoses and get the bolt lined up, it goes pretty quick. The easiest bolt to get to is the one that I have right here, and you can get at it with a 6-inch extension and a E12 torque socket. And then here's your air pump. It's just 1 hose and 1 connector and 3 bolts. The bolts are T40 Torx. Now that I mentioned that, T40 Torx, like you can kind of see on this car, there's a trend going. You only really need like 4 tools to do this. It's really not that bad. And then here's me installing the brake booster vacuum pump. There's 1 connector and 1 vacuum hose. Be careful with the vacuum hose, because if you crack that hose, you'll get the brake booster fault on your dashboard, and you don't want that. Matter of fact, almost all the plastic hoses on this car you need to be very careful with. These cars are starting to get kind of old, you know. It's 15 years old, and they are very brittle and easy to break, and it's, you know, a $100,000 car that has depreciated down to a $5,000 car, but you still pay $100,000 car part prices for it. It's ridiculous. As you can see now, I'm installing my passenger side airbox. These little screws right here, they're not like a regular screw. You turn them 180 degrees and line up a dot, and you pull them straight out. There's a little channel with a groove on it. There's a lot of other videos on YouTube that explain this. This video is more for somebody who has kind of poked around a Cayenne and knows what they're doing a little bit. It's not a hard job, but I would not highly recommend this job to, let's say, let's say if you could do just an oil change. I probably wouldn't suggest this. You need a little bit of know-how to do this, but it's not like super hard, if that makes sense, if you're trying to get what I'm saying. So now all you gotta do is install your beauty covers. I'm still new to YouTube and new to video editing, so I'm kind of bouncing around and I don't know if I get my word out that well. So obviously, guys, if you have any questions, feel free to post it in the comment section. I'll be happy to answer them. Anything you think I may have missed, or any question you may have about a specific subject on this job, I'll be very happy to answer your guys' questions. But in that case, if you like this video, please leave a like. If you like my other videos, please subscribe. Hit the bell icon too. That way when I upload videos, you get notified. And enjoy.
So you found the parts, and you got your